8,000 miles to TapTown. My name is Finbar, and this is Jim Lampi, The Pilgrimage. Jim Lampi is a musical icon, especially when it comes to playing the stick. The dynamics, the expression, the sound that he squeezes out of his instrument is something that's simply jaw-dropping, something that stops anyone in their tracks. His command of the stick and music in general takes the listener on a journey that crosses many dimensions, basically a pilgrimage to inner emotions. It's no surprise that his playing and music has taken him to every corner of the globe, capturing audiences with his dynamic, soulful, and atmospheric approach. So if you're a fan of the series or just a fan of music in general, this episode is an absolute must. His stories are second to none, and his presence truly captivating. We had a super fun chat earlier, and I'm truly honored to bring this episode to you. Jim Lampi.
There's a word, even through solid air.
You'll remember from last time.
Yeah, that's right. On a previous episode. So, welcome, Jim. Welcome to the show, mate. It's an honor to have you on. You know, I know we've covered this story off before, but we've had all these sort of incidents. It seems like a bit of a TV series going on here, trying to get this, but it's such a great story. It's worth it. So, thank you for joining us.
Good. Yeah, we're really happy to join you too, Finbar.
Awesome, bud.
No.
So, Jim, we got to get back to this beginning because your story is just insano, Captain Insano. So, let's get back to the beginning, mate. So, where did it all start for you?
It all started, let's see, way back in Southern California, and I was like everybody in California at the time. I played guitar, and it was required by law. You got to know one piece of harmony, and playing in bands and trying to write some things. But I was kind of interested in composing, and I saw this article in, I think it was Los Angeles Times, in about 1976 or so. And it talked about this instrument called the Chapman Stick, and I'd never heard of it. And it was just the guy was a real reputable, writer. I can't remember which one it was, but he just spoke about this amazing creation that was kind of a piano technique on a string instrument and all that. And it was Emma Chapman with the Chapman Stick. So I, at the time, I was going to take up piano, but I went to see this concert between two pianists, and one side was Chick Corea, and the other side was Herbie Hancock.
Oh, wow.
I figured I wasn't going to get there,
Yeah.
I was just going, oh well, what am I going to do, And then, like what I like to say is, so I went up to there was one in a store in Newport Beach. I think it was a Guitar Center or whatever, and it was hanging on the wall, and it was all kind of covered in slime from a lot of 15-year-old kids playing around it. Nobody knew how to play it. It was out of tune. It didn't particularly sound like anything, really. It was pretty dead. But I thought the idea was great. I'll try to learn to play while it gets better, and I'll get better. That kind of thing, if it's that new.
Yeah.
And so I bought it, and I took it back down to San Diego. And I was just trying to start. I was playing gigs before with guitar and things, and I would try to sneak this in. And I was trying to become, I was going to become a musician and all that. And I remember the keyboard player telling me at one point, "Burn that thing." So
What, just
I
well,
got a
just because it
job.
was, it must have been at that time. That was only just after he invented it, right? It was pretty much
Well, I
brand
think
new.
it was for sale. I think it came out for sale in 1974,
Right,
and I think he started working on it in 68.
right, okay.
So I was kind of, like I like to say, at the time, this was in San Diego. I was finishing university down there and living at the beach and that kind of lifestyle and everything. And
Beautiful.
I like to say that at the time, I was the best stick player in San Diego. I was also the worst stick player in San Diego.
Probably the only
And
stick player in San Diego, right?
at that time, yeah, I was probably at that time. I mean, and it was pretty funny. And then I tried to go out on a gig with this. We had this kind of steady gig, which was shocking because I actually ended up for a while. It got me going. I had actually a steady gig at this restaurant chain. And then I got a gig for a while at that chain with a guy who played the Moog synth with the three stacks. And
It's
plus,
like
it
Rick
looked like a
Wakeman
switch.
type thing.
Yeah, with the switches though, it looked like a
Oh,
telephone, old
what?
telephone switchboard, and it didn't go over really well. Between a
Like,
bad,
I feel for the guy who had to carry it. Like, the one good thing about the stick is it's you just walk in, right? But
yeah,
see, that poor guy. Oh,
well, the whole thing, it didn't go over really well, but I continued playing despite everybody's comments, and I figured I was going to have to move because San Diego at the time was pretty much a backwater. The two bands that were the most popular at the time, one band was known for snorting tequila up your nose, and the other band was basically run by a famous drunk.
right,
So that I realized I wouldn't last long, and it didn't quite fit what I was interested in. So I talked to me and the keyboard player, my best friend at the time, Bill Marquez. We moved to San Francisco area because that chain, which got us through all this thing, was also up there.
right.
And so we managed to talk ourselves into a job up there. I managed to get it playing together a bit, where I was a bit braver. I could fit around his good piano playing. He had still had the big Fender Rhodes to drag around, where I still
Yeah,
only had the little stick,
yeah, yeah.
right? But it went over okay. And plus, those kind of change. You're playing for happy hour and drunks and everything. In fact, that was my first solo gigs. I got a solo gig at like a happy hour gig. So as long as I just kept playing, nobody ever noticed what you were playing because they were just ordering drinks all the time. And occasionally somebody, oh, what?
So
But as long
were you doing covers or were you just sort of making it up?
I was doing covers. I was doing, yeah, those kind of jobs you have to do covers, but I was trying to do things I liked. I was playing some Steely Dan tunes
Right.
and, whatever I could think of at the time. And then I would throw in some originals and I would throw in a few instrumental things, a little jazzy influenced things. And that kind of got me, over the hump, let's say, because, first off, singing and playing at the same time is a great combination because it stops you from
Focusing.
being
Yeah.
desperate to look at your fingers. And the microphone's there. I had a tendency to close my eyes, so often bash my face with the microphone, but that's just part of the job.
Yeah.
And I was really lucky that I was living in the Palo Alto area. And at the time, there was a place called the Varsity Theater run by the Luge family. And Randy Luge was a guy, the younger son, and he really was running a music show there. It's an old theater, like a 30s theater with a front, courtyard and a restaurant. And in the summer, they had music outside and they had music inside, they had music almost every night of the week. And
Wow.
everybody there was amazing.
Wow.
It just attracted musicians. So unsigned, nobody was signed anything. Have you ever heard Tuck and Patty?
Of course. Yeah.
Fantastic. I mean,
Amazing.
best guitarist, still the best guitarist in terms of just a good raw guitarist. And of course, Patty was amazing voice. Michael Hedges
Wow.
played every week. Tuck and Patty played every week.
Wow.
Michael Manring would come in. He was a buddy of Michael Hedges.
Yeah.
It just was full of great musicians. And then they'd bring in people that lived in the Bay Area. So they would play in the theater more concerts that were better known. So that I think Van Morrison played,
Wow.
bands and play. And it was just known as the place to go if you wanted music. So you could see all kinds of things. And I was the funny stick player. And you know, the thing is, I tried to get into Berkeley School of Music with it, and they just kind of laughed at me. You know, first, you know, they said maybe you can try the saxophone, but my saxophone playing was, you know, pretty bog standard. So I kept looking around, and thank God. I mean, the best thing that happened is because of Tuck, he
Yeah.
was a great guitar teacher.
Right.
Also, he still gives lessons, but he didn't play any. He didn't tap. He played guitar, but he was
Yeah.
so phenomenal with his technique in even one hand. I
Yeah.
thought if he could do all that with one hand, in
Yeah.
terms of his accomplishing multiple parts and things, and he would just organize ideas for me and send me home. So it
Wow.
wasn't like he was going to make me play because he didn't know how to tap and he didn't know what a stick was, but he knew what the tuning was. So
Wow.
he would say, "Okay, this is a tuning. You got this organized tuning. You go home. Um, there's only three notes in a major triad. You go home and you work out first off all the triads on three strings, and it just repeats over and over because it's the same tuning. So automatically, it was being laid out right in front of me, and I was getting a few interesting gigs. I got to open for Jerry Garcia,
Wow.
the Grateful Dead, on a solo gig. A few things like that.
So it's fair to say that like Tuck Andress was taught you the stick.
He did. He was my biggest influence in terms of, okay, I mean, Em and I when I went up to, yeah, I forgot to say, that when I went up from San Diego to thinking I was going to go to like a small guitar factory, you know, and,
Yeah.
and everything. And I was going, okay, we're going to go up. So Phil and I went up, drove up. I talked to him because I needed strings. So I thought,
Right.
okay, we'll go see where the stick is made. Maybe we'll get to meet somebody or something. It turns out you drive up to Laurel Canyon, and there was just Emmett. Oh, hello. And there's Yuta, his wife, and there's the two daughters, Dinah and Gracie,
Yeah.
and the dog. And, oh, come on in, and so we're like, oh, okay, and I took some lessons from Emmett. And I think because Emmett was he's not the normal musician. Nobody I know, guitars wise, would go home and rip their guitar apart and
Right.
show up with more strings and things on the next gig kind of
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
He was
Okay.
more like, he had these ideas and science and things.
Right.
So that's why, in a sense, he kept going and he invented this instrument and he kept making it better and better.
Right.
So I took some lessons from Emmett that got me started,
Right.
but it wasn't your standard kind of lesson. It really kind of just opened your mind that you don't have to approach things. Generally, if you learn guitar, okay,
Yeah.
you've got your E chord and your C chord and your D chord. And he was kind of talking about a different approach to music in a sense. So, but when I went up to Tuck helped me organize, there's only 12 notes, and he helped me organize it on a big string instrument and go home and work it out yourself, which has always stuck with me. It's the best way for somebody to learn an instrument, especially a string
I,
instrument, and
I
organized
find
like that.
just on that point, I find that really fascinating because you're back way back when there was no instructional videos, there's no internet,
Now,
there's maybe the freehands book and that's it. And you jump to today, and because I get a lot of people asking me, like they look at my war guitar or the stick and they go, "Oh, this looks so confusing. I wouldn't know where to start." And it's like part of the fun is, at least for me, is saying to them, "Look, you still got all this access to stuff now, and you've got these videos, and you've got strike
yeah,
lessons and all that." But for me, it's the exploration and mapping. Like as you were saying, mapping the fingerboard, and it becomes a really visual layout, and just that becomes exciting working it out yourself in
yeah,
a lot of ways.
and this was the thing. He helped me kind of feel comfortable that I knew something about music because I'd
Right.
only had these certain kinds of saxophone I could read, you know what I mean? But that he got me grounded in some theory. He showed me that first off, the tuning's very organized. So he started visualizing, and I'm a kind of a visually based person, being
Yeah.
kind of doing a lot of artwork and things like that. And you could start seeing the graphics of it. You could see that it's a really logical instrument, In fact, the fourths and the fifths are logical extensions of each other. The
Yeah.
motion is
Exactly.
exactly the same. 1 to 4, if you go in the same direction, is still 1 to 4. The difference
Yeah.
is the bass would go down to the F. Let's say if you're at C and the The guitar would go, the side or the higher side would go from C to F up higher, but it was still
Yeah.
the same motion. So you could do these things. There were all these things you could do that you couldn't do. And the
Yeah. Right.
chords start making sense. And you start visualizing lots of things that are more like what piano players have always been able to have,
Yeah.
splash chords and stackings of thirds. And you can start visualizing all this and putting it into systems, which is really hard to do, I think, on guitar.
Yeah. Very much. Yeah. Yeah.
Guitar, you really you're learning position playing and you're learning it with open strings and you're dealing with all these other things. So anyway, I got started there, and Bay Area was amazing at that time. I was just really lucky, that one of those moments that you
What year
realize
was
you're
that,
just
Jim?
lucky.
Like what years was that round roughly?
Around the late 70s.
Right.
Okay. And I was getting some other gigs and things around. I was still doing some of that chain. And I mean, there were things like, I think I mentioned it before, there was this thing called the Bog Dynamite Society,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
The Beach
yeah.
and Bog Dynamite Society. And it was this guy's living room at the beach.
Whatever happened to the fisherman love? Did they bury it with him in the ground? Whatever happened to the fisherman's dream? Did it know where to be found? Tell me, did it fade? Did it fade away? Did it fade on down to the ocean? Tell me, did it fade away? Fade on down to the sea, to the ocean and the sea.
And every Sunday, whoever was playing at like the bigger, I can't remember the name of the jazz club, like it was the bigger jazz club in San Francisco, or somebody playing maybe an American Music Hall or something, they would come and play in this guy's living room.
Wow.
But also Tuck and Patty played there. Bobby McFerrin, who was unknown at the time. In fact, Tuck tried to hook me up with Bobby McFerrin and said, maybe you could back him, And I didn't realize he was a one-man band as it was,
Right.
But you could see amazing people in this guy's living room overlooking the beach and have a piece of cake. And I don't remember,
Wow.
it was really cheap in comparison. Anyway, that got me started. I played gigs with, I even used to play at prisons and things with this organization run by Joan Baez and Maria Mulder. So I got to play some gigs with them. And it was San Francisco at its finest, It
Wow,
was
what a
just
melting!
everything.
What it just sounds like
Yeah,
an electric hive of activity over there with houses and
It was. I
prisons.
played in Latin bands because I grew up around a lot of Latino stuff, and where I grew up in Southern California was about a quarter, a third Latinos. So I was always interested in that kind of thing, and I took some lessons from a jazz pianist who played lots of salsa and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Salsa, go into a club, and the big difference was unlike a jazz club. Suddenly people would jump up and start dancing, and the bands would be amazing and everything. So, he was showing me these odd time signatures, but not kind of in that waltz for people with three legs kind of approach to odd time signatures. He was, this stuff swings. It really swings, no matter
Wow.
what the time, three, 7/8 and whatever. It was just great.
Yeah.
But then as we reached the end of
By the
that
way, I
period,
think let's just highlight that artifact. You're probably one of the only stick players in history that's been playing the stick while people have been dancing.
Occasionally, but I wasn't got to. I didn't get to be in those bands. That was the
Right.
thing. That
Oh,
was just
okay.
a
All right.
highlight for me. That I
Right.
would go and see these,
Right.
and
Oh, okay.
bands
Right.
playing. And it was a it was a that was just the amazing thing. You have to see. Well, everybody's getting up and dancing. It was kind of a. You can make really interesting music that people can really get into.
Yeah.
That was
Right.
the
Yeah.
kind, and so, but as things go, things go up and things go down, and
Yeah.
disco music really hit. So that
Right.
was the point where lots of young people coming in from offices with the kind of shirts undone, the big collars, the
Yeah.
gold medallions, and
Yeah. That's right.
they're
Yeah.
all playing. What was that game they all used to play? Anyway, it wasn't dominoes, but on the
Right.
board and everything, and they'd be snorting things up their
Yeah. That's right.
noses.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
everything, all the live gigs suddenly went to dance floors.
Right.
So
Wow.
I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do.
Yeah.
I was still kind of playing, but I didn't want to. This is how I was going to learn because I wasn't going to get to university with this.
Yeah.
And I wasn't quite ready to go out and get like a design job.
Right.
And so I, somebody told me, that it was one of these stories at the time that people would go over to Europe, and I'd never been over there. And they said, if you go to Europe, there's a kind of way people just go around. You buy a car in Amsterdam, you drive around. And I thought, okay, maybe I'll do that for a summer. If I survive, if I don't, and I'll take my stick with me. So I built it. I built a flight case. I had this amplifier in there, which it broke down. I think they threw it off the plane.
Yeah.
I landed in London. I couldn't get up the escalator with everything. It was about ridiculous. I was basically kind of run out with my tail between my legs after about 2 weeks. Nobody was
What
interested.
was that? Customs or something? Or
And, no, just kind of, there was no place, I couldn't find whatever
right.
niche I was going to find.
Okay. Cool.
But so I barely made it. I barely made it. In fact, I was left on the side of the road by a bus, and I barely made it to the ferry that got me to Amsterdam. So it was a sign that said, "Get out of town fast."
Right. Fair enough. Okay.
And I got to Amsterdam, and everything kind of finally changed a bit. I found a place to live for a little while. I still had a little bit of money left. I bought a car, like people said. There were these places that would sell you cheap cars. I the landlady kind of took pity on me, and somebody said to me, "Listen, I got a few gigs lined up, but they weren't going to happen for how gigs go. Maybe a
Yeah.
month or
Sure.
two."
Yeah.
And I got a couple of gigs lined up in some really cool places, but it was going to take time. And somebody said to me, "Listen, buy this little battery powered amp, go out in the street." And I didn't really come over to bust per se. I was going to just try to work my way around and meet people and see what happened. But he said, "Buy this little battery powered amp, go out in Lads Supply or wherever it was, play." So I'm I said, okay, I'll give it a try. I go out there, I'm playing Weather Report, I'm playing
Yeah.
whatever I feel like. And that's the other thing, you can play whatever you felt like. So I was playing Birdland and I'd play all these kind of tunes.
Yeah.
And the first day out, I made about $50 and got taken to lunch.
Wow.
And
Amazing.
I thought, oh, this is maybe going to work. So I was off and running. So I managed to pay off the little car, get in my car. It broke down about it by the time I got to Berlin, but I took it all back, got another car, off I went again. Started just busking and things. I met a bunch of people in Paris who I still know,
Yeah.
Americans and English and all kinds of things who were playing gigs, but busking also. That's how. And we were playing all kinds of great gigs.
And had they seen a stick before over at that period of time in Amsterdam? Was that like something completely new for them?
I don't know about them whether reading about it, but I don't remember seeing any stick players
Right.
at that point. I don't remember seeing any. There
Yeah,
might
you
have
would have
been.
certainly been in a very small number of people globally that were playing it, right?
Yeah. And people would come up and say all the things that everybody else has said, like, can you make it sound like a trumpet? Because synths were becoming the new thing.
Right.
That's also, that was something. Synthesizers had come along. By this time, it's right at the beginning of the 80s, and synths were just taking off. So people were things new in music were automatically seen as some kind of electronics.
Right. Sure.
So they would either think you're not doing it, you're playing the backing tapes, a dog would come up and piss in my case. And I thought, well, this is the end of this kind of thing. I'm not sure I'm going to do this anymore. But I kind of got a great trip around. One moment I'd be sleeping with my feet sticking out of the car. The next moment I'd be sleeping in some palace in Salzburg, going, because of music fans and
Yeah,
people who are
sure.
musicians. And they said, come, come stay. It's okay. I got a place. My dad's gone at the moment. I got an extra room, and I'd be overlooking this amazing river and everything like
Wow.
that. And so I went all over the place. Still contact with quite a few of those people I met. Um,
There's
Played
something
gigs,
just
but
on that, just while we're there. There's something so beautiful in that sort of performance of music and connection, and how it inspires people, how it brings people together. That and I don't want to sound like an old grumpy fart here, but it seems like that.
sound like an old grumpy fart. That's
Yeah,
okay.
but it seems like
I'm one
that's
too.
been lost a little bit. You know what I mean? Like it's the, oh yeah, I just saw this, come over here and let's do this, and then meet this person, and it's all like
Yeah.
and part of the technology, and it's all great. Like it's amazing what you can do in your bedroom, but I sort of, when I was young too, I experienced that traveling, and it's just hearing you talk about those stories. It is this really amazing power that music has to bring people together, people you'd never met before, and then all of a sudden you're
By
staying at their
chance, you
house,
meet
and
just
next minute you're,
amazing people.
yeah,
Just by chance, somebody, movie stars walk up to you, and if you're playing, of course, I had a shtick. I was,
sure,
what is that thing?
yeah,
That
sure,
obviously. And I got taken to ear cam by a guy that, ear cam's like this amazing contemporary music thing that was buried underneath the Pompidou Center. And you could just do all this stuff. And I was playing jazz gigs. So next thing you know, it was all happening.
yeah,
Uh,
wow,
so I went back to the States after that summer with lots of nice contacts in Europe and then wondering what I was going to do.
yeah,
Nothing was happening yet in the States at the time. And somebody invited me back the next summer to do a summer tour in Norway.
right,
So I decided it was off to the land of my forefather kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
And although they were on the other Finnish side, but that was close enough.
yeah,
And so I went to Norway, and it was like a traveling band of gypsies for a round. But I met some great musicians. One guy's great, Niels Ökland has an album out on. He was a hauling fiddle and violinist.
okay,
You'd meet people out of the difference also with a country like that, lots of talented people, but it's a small country.
yeah,
So you meet people, they don't divide up so much.
right,
You'd go to a party and it would be the classical musicians would be dancing to the Stevie Wonder or the Earth, Wind and Fire or the blah blah blah,
yeah,
and you would meet the jazz musicians and you would meet the folk musicians and the local artists because they have the art shows and everybody knows the one guy's drunk and he's standing outside the gate of the gallery going, let me show this here
yeah,
kind of thing, and everybody knew everything. So I met people that were playing, with just famous classical musicians. I got to meet all these ECM musicians. You got to go to Blue Whale, got to go to the Atlas Studios over in Stockholm, open for Dave Lindley. Um, it was
there's something
wonderful.
about that area, Jim. Like I absolutely, Finland is one of my favorite places on earth right now. Like I've been there quite a bit, and I love the
Oh,
whole
great.
Scandinavian countries. And there's this. People often ask me, because I used to go quite a bit before COVID, and people would be like, "What is it there?" And I'm like, "Well," I said, let me explain an experience that happened to me in Iceland relating to music, which would probably explain a little bit about it, even though Iceland's again its own thing. But I was walking down Greta Skada, which is like the main street in Reykjavik, and there's this toilet block on the side of the road which you go down into. It's off the main street, and
Yeah.
it says public toilet, but then it said punk rock museum. So I'm like, okay.
That's
So
about right.
I walk down
Toilet,
these
public
steps,
toilet,
and all I
and
hear
rock
is
museum.
all this music blaring out this public toilet block, and I go inside it, and it's all smashed down, right? So it's all toilet block. It's all been smashed with a drum kit, a bass guitar, and just a Strat there. I'm like,
Yeah.
and this guy meets me, and he's like, hello,
Hello.
welcome to the punk museum. And there's just this iconoclastic culture of that wasn't really, it was an old toilet block, but they turned it into a punk museum. And you just in there, and the guy's telling you stories about the sugar cubes and the early punk in Iceland. And it's this
Yeah.
mix whereby it sort of doesn't work, but it works, and it's just. And I
Yeah.
find that about these countries, it's like they're all so friendly and they're so open, but there's these things that just don't. It's like a round puzzle, and it's so refreshing to me. I don't
Yeah.
know. Is that what your experience was like?
My experience, well, to tell you, I was never quite secure in the States. I showed up, and I think by the end of summer, I had a semi-permanent place to live in a student dormitory,
Right.
which people have been living in this student dorm for like 10 years. And there are lots of musicians, and they're going, okay, here's a guy. He's American. Don't worry about that. He plays this funny instrument. And there would be classical musicians living in there, and artists and students, obviously. And they're going, he needs a place to stay. We got a room over here. I said, okay, okay. So
Yeah.
suddenly I was more secure there than I was in the States within about 3 months. And same thing, found great people to play with. I was playing with this amazing drummer named Tor Andreasen, and it was all wonderful. And then I decided, well, I better go back and find out what the rest of the world is like, kind of thing. So I moved back down to Paris. That was great. Played lots of great things, but wasn't quite sure. Did that for about a year, so year and a half. Wasn't quite sure what to do at that point. And Emmett said, well, also I was invited over to England to come and do a seminar because by that point the stick was getting a little bit known. So I was going to come over to, I think it was Rod Argent's. There's a street called Denmark Street in
Denmark
London.
Street, right? Soho, yeah.
Yeah. And it's a whole rows of
Mm.
music stores
Yeah,
with
yeah,
a couple of cafes and a bar maybe at the end, kind of thing,
yeah, yeah,
typical music. One pub on this end,
yeah,
the Angel, which I still occasionally will go to, and then a cheap caf, and then a bunch of music stores. And so they invited me to come do a seminar, and I thought, wow, I'm legit now. So I got on the train, over and came in. And the guy said at the border, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm coming to teach a seminar. Give a little seminar at Denmark." He said, "No, you're not. You can't work here. You have no permit, and here's a 7-day stamp, and you're not
right,
allowed to do anything." So I managed to do the little thing without saying anything. Went back to Paris. Emmett's, and then I kind of snuck in. Next time I was just a traveling American, you know. Went in, started playing some gigs, got in trouble a bit with the musicians union who didn't particularly like musicians coming in from outside.
right.
But I was there, and as these stories go, met my future wife.
Yeah,
There you go. And had to figure out how I'm going to stay in this. How am I going to stay here? Because it's kind of difficult, and they don't really like musicians coming in. So Emmett said, "Well, I'll make you a businessman." So I was become a company rep. I
right.
was no longer a lonely stick player. I was a
Yeah,
company rep for Stick Enterprises,
right.
and the store that would sell it, and I would demo the stick. I would give lessons in the store if they needed that, and occasionally on Saturdays in the summer, I would go out and play in front of the store. was one of the best gigs I had. 'Cause again, you play anything you want. So I would
Right.
try out songs, play a little weather report, play some jazzier kind of things, play some rockish kind of things, make stuff up, and you meet, who did I meet of it? Musicians would come up to you. I think it was Jimi Hendrix's bass player came up and, what's that thing, kind of,
Hmm.
it was great. So I got my start kind of happening.
Wow.
And I ended up also because of the strange laws in London. I don't know if it was all England. You were only allowed two people on stage
Really?
unless you had a music license. Unless you had a music license, you were only allowed two people on stage.
Wow.
So, and for places who wanted to have live music, but needed to get around this whole music license thing, they have usually, and I met all these horn players, great horn players and stuff that played with a group called the Jazz Warriors, which became kind of the thing. A lot of these people became well known in England. And jazz was kind of the scene at the time, which I didn't realize. And so I would back a guy like Philip Bent was a flute player that I would back, and Steve Williamson, and all these kind of Tony Remy, and once I think Courtney Pine, which was kind of a big name. But they needed somebody, not normally. What can you back up a horn player? What they usually have a keyboard player, guitarist, occasionally a bass.
Right.
But it's pretty hard to pull off a gig,
Yeah, sure.
for a horn player. So I was suddenly offering them kind of a trio sound,
Okay.
somewhat of a bass guitar and, that kind of thing. So anyway, that was my start. And yeah, and it was getting a little bit, occasionally get going and things like that. And then one of these times I managed to, playing one of these kind of gigs off the side, a guy came stumbling in. I mean, what's that guy? With kind of bare, obviously a little bit, and he said, "Wow, can you play?" And I think he named some jazz standard, which I happened to kind of could get through.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go. He said, "I'm playing on Jules Holland this weekend," which was, I don't know if you know the Jules
Yeah.
Holland show.
Yeah, sure.
In a way, it's the best music show in England.
Yeah.
It's always been because it's one of the few shows you have everything. You have singers, you have new bands, you had punk bands, you had old blues guys, everything. And it was John Martin. And he said, I'm playing this. And he was doing one of his Havana stays, and I couldn't recognize him. And anyway, I actually managed to make this contact, and I started doing gigs with John Martin, which for
Wow.
me was kind of always following along with this guy. And I didn't really, the first band I was in, the guitarist said, "We have to do a John Martin song. We have to do a John Martin song." So this was at university. And we used to do something off of his most famous album, which was, oh God,
That one.
that one.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
I'll be really feel stupid, now.
Yeah, that's
because
right.
it's just a famous, famous album.
Yeah.
And then Michael Hedges used to do songs, Um, he used to do these songs. I go, "Whose song is that?" And he goes, "This is John Martin's song. It's John Martin's song." And so when I got this gig, these were the two guys I really wanted to tell. I also ended up buying it, yeah, and I just wanted to, tell them, "Got this gig with John Martin," and both of them happened to be dead at that point, and it was just like, oh my God, who am I going to tell?
Wow.
It'll understand this whole thing.
And just,
Solid Air.
and so you met him out
That
the
was
front of
name
the
the
store
album.
at Denmark Street. Is that just jamming? Did I get that right?
Pardon?
That he
Pardon?
came up to you while you were demoing.
No, I was playing a gig.
Oh,
I
you're
actually
playing a
had
gig. Right.
I had a solo gig.
Right.
So I was, and it was, one of those kind of gigs you do, and you're in the corner playing and you're singing or whatever and playing and doing some originals and doing this and that. So it was just luck. And he was stumbling in before he went on to play on the Jules Holland show.
Wow.
So that was my kind of entry into that end of the English music scene. So you tour around, you got to play Glastonbury. We do the Flaw festivals. Was this thing where I played New York and Chicago and LA, and we were playing the LA clubs. Ones that I used to not be able to get into because I was too young when I grew up in the LA area.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, it was great. It was fun, and I was the funny stick player, So
Yeah, but there's something in that again. Like what I'm hearing and the way I sort of hearing these artifacts and synthesizing it. For me, there's a story behind the story here of, someone who sees the guitar and goes, well, it's not. It's. I want to go further, and you find this instrument and it's experimental, and no one has one, and you bother to try and just push through, and all this cognitive bias of, I can't do that, and you just go and explore, and then all of a sudden the journey of you and that instrument takes you all over the world, meeting these amazing people and places, and partially because it's so new and so
Yeah.
the thing that actually could have been a barrier to you learning it actually became one of its greatest assets in the fact that it was different and it attracted people.
Yeah.
The fact that it's fascinating.
And it was still kind of at the point where people didn't look at it and automatically think it was a synthesizer, which
Right.
kind of now when you play anything different, they kind of think it's a synthesizer sometimes. And
Right.
there was still some of that, but that just got me started in England. So I've been here, at least based here, ever since. I go back and play at the Dom show, and Emmett would send me around. I'd play and those were fun too. Because you got to play for musicians, walking out trade shows. The Dom show, hilarious. One side of the aisle is heavy metal guy playing away, and on the other side of the aisle was the bluegrass players
Yeah.
crossing each other. It looked like a cartoon, and the bluegrass player, ding 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 ding.
Yeah.
It was hilarious. And the worst thing was, I on a Sunday afternoon at an LA Now show, I was all burned out, a little hungover, and at Utah, Emmett's wife says,
Yeah.
"Jim, play Birdland," and I kind of go, "Okay," and I'm and I went, and I know that she's teaching German to this guy over with a little beanie cap on and a
Right.
mustache. And there's this kid next to him, teenager. And the teenager kind of looks at me like, "You're a wanker,"
Yeah.
And, that's all I'm going. And after he walks away a little bit, I say, "Yuto, was that Zawino? Was that Joe Zawino? The person who wrote all those songs,
Right. Wow.
Mr. Weather Report."
Right.
And she goes, "Yes, would you like to meet him?" I was like, no, because he hates it. It was known by that point that he hates the song because everybody, that was his song. He wrote "Mercy, Mercy, Mercy" also. He wrote all these things, but Birdland is one of those songs which people would always. And she went and got him and brought him back. And I'm sitting there kind of, and he's going, and his son's looking at me like,
Yeah.
And I never played that song for years afterwards.
Really?
I was.
I remember when I
shell-shocked.
was 17, I was Australia's first clinician for BC Rich back then when Bernie Rico owned it. So that they flew me over to play the NAMM show. I can't even remember what year, 84 or 85, I think it was. And I still remember Stick Enterprises was downstairs. So
Right.
I was in this booth right amongst all these heavy metal guitars, and I know what you mean. Everyone's playing over each other. It was just a mess of noise. It was really hard to hear anything, and it was, in a way, it was a bit like the Michael Jackson Thriller film clip. There was all these guitarists would walk up, and they'd all be like gangs, and they'd all be checking everyone out and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I
And you
remember
could tell
going
whoever
down.
the star was. You could tell
Sorry?
who the star was because it'd be a trail, an entourage.
Yeah, that's. I know it was fascinating. I still remember Paul Gilbert coming out and his roadie having the drill with the picks on it, and he was saying he's going to play faster than Chris Implementary or whatever his name was, and everyone was like, "Oh, I've got to see him play faster than this Chris Implementary," and he was really young, and he got out and he just started playing, and then this roadie came out with the picks, all of that sort of stuff. It was so Spinal Tap, but it was great. But I remember going downstairs and seeing the stick thing, and I was like, wow, this is incredible. But I had no idea how it worked. That was my first interaction with Stick Enterprises.
That was your first time you saw one at a NOM show.
First one ever, yeah.
Wow.
Because I was from Australia,
great.
and there was none in Australia. Actually, no.
Well-
My friend who was in a band called Ice House, Glenn Kravchuk, he was over
Right.
touring internationally, and they came back, and he had one. But I saw it for about 2 minutes, but I never
I
got to
took
play
my
it.
stick to Australia. I
Yeah?
took my stick to Australia. I had a friend named Zoisby Held, who was a producer and keyboard player,
Okay.
a German guy, but he was based here. He would do bands like Spandau Ballet and things
Right.
like that. And he had he had friends and a little piece of a ranch on Kangaroo Island off of
Okay.
Adelaide.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So we went off on our Australian adventure and we recorded and we played with some Aboriginal musicians and local guys that were from the university. And because Joyce was also a producer and everything and kind of, modern production. And we went over there and had a great time, and came back with these tapes and everything like that from these live gigs also. We played all over the place, these live gigs and, playing the
Yeah.
stick. And so we put out an album. It's called Dream to Machine, and happens to be if you wanted to
Oh,
have a listen to it on
yeah,
Bandcamp
yeah.
and things.
Great. Yeah, I'll check it
It's
out.
actually not bad. And I would do wind synth and stick and things like that. And we had Frank Yama, who is a kind of a well-known Aboriginal singer-songwriter on it.
Yep.
It yeah, it still holds up pretty good today. So that's
Wow.
that's a nice thing. And yeah, I got to be a stick player around there, and just in time for Robbie Burns night, I think, where I had too much whiskey, and somehow ended up, there was the Scottish contingent of Adelaide.
Oh my
But
God.
yeah,
When a Scotsman starts drinking, their language, have you ever noticed they start to, you can understand them when they're not drinking, but when they're drinking, it's like, there's another language comes out.
ah,
Yeah.
all I
You know, you say, and you're like, what? What are you talking about?
exactly. I okay, digress slightly. When I first got to England, I got on a train trying to, and I was going somewhere, and I was sitting next to a drunk Scots guy, and I couldn't understand anything he said, but he went, "Ah, fucking Maggie Thatcher," and that's all I could understand was, and then the rest was,
Yeah. It's like, mate, you're out of band. You need retuning. Static,
yeah, exactly. So anyway, and that's so I'm still playing with people. I play with a great drummer percussionist named Sammy D, who I think you can find him on what's it? Yeah, if you look at sammyd.com, and he's on a couple of sites, and I've been playing with him. I go around doing seminars. The seminars, and everyone's got a different flavor to it. You go to France, like trade shows.
Yeah.
And these things they play in Italy and France and that. And I occasionally, it's just hard now to get back to the States at all. But I really would love to go back and do, especially now, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately wasn't back for the funeral and everything, which is sad.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it'd be great to go back and see people. And I noticed on your side it was fun because when I left, there was a whole other, there's new instruments. I know some of the people that started the instruments around here, like Marcus Reuter used to go to some of the seminars,
Yeah.
and Ziggy went to some of the seminars,
Yeah.
and, but I don't know. Frank Jolliffe, I knew very well because he used to
Yeah.
teach together and drink Belgian beer all. He'd tell me what's going on in New York. He was a great jazz player
Yeah.
with the stick, and he bought a war guitar. So he was the first war guitar I ever got to try out on things
Right.
on. And yeah, that was it was just fun. I'd love to go
Well,
back and see.
it's incredible for me being able to talk to, this whole and hearing all these stories, and you're one of the icons of the instrument, and it's just, hearing. I don't know. It's just for me. I just love. I love all the stories, and I just think it's.
Well, I'm sure you have fun also, just from going around.
Oh
your
yeah,
place.
no, it's yeah. Well, I've also got my own crazy life as well, but it's I just love personally. I love adventure and I love exploration, and it's just I know. I think music is the ultimate. I don't know. For me, music is this ultimate, never-ending journey, and I find when I'm very. I love the thing about this instrument is it just for me it instills a whole heap of passion. Hearing all your stories and where it's taken you, for me it's a new horizon, and it's exciting for me. And I just I'm sure it's going to translate to a lot of other people because the series is doing really well, and a lot of people are tuning in, and it's just it's just great to just hear how your life has evolved with this instrument and some of the other people that have connected through it.
One of the one things I've really realized is all my really best friends. Now I've been, like anyone, I've got a twins and mortgage and all that kind of thing, and I have my day job part of the time, and and then I get to go out and pretend I'm a musician and all that kind of thing. but almost all of my friends, and especially long-term friends, are all about music.
Yeah.
Even if they're not musicians, it's because of music almost that some kind of bind there. So people I've known, I'm still in contact with people I know because of music from
Yeah.
whenever. And that's been great. I'd love to get out and see people again. And I, try to work on new material. They keep me enthused and say, well, when are you going to put something out? So during the COVID times, I've decided I better put out, nobody can play together. So I'm going to work on kind of my version of
Fantastic.
a solo stick album, kind of an instrumental album where you're playing kind of solo songs like, some of my people that I'm a big fan of, the
Yeah.
Keith Jarrett albums and the Pat Metheny albums where they just play solo and you go, that's just wonderful. It
Yeah.
takes on a different atmosphere. So I might try something like that. And the reason I got the stick at the beginning anyway was to write.
Mm.
So, you write some other funny tunes when nobody else is around. You can write those tunes for waltzes
Yeah.
for people with 3 legs and that kind of thing. And
Well, mate, I
that's
hope one day to be able to catch up in person, either over in the UK or
I
you
hope
over here. If
so.
you get to Australia, it'd be just great to see you in real
You
life
got to
in
pass through
IRL.
London. Come to London. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, well,
Definitely.
that's where I was born. I've got a lot of family there, so I do get back quite a bit.
You
So
have an excuse. You have an excuse. I don't have a really good excuse to go out Australia, but I'll have to find one. Well, I do now. See?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, we can always make up some sort of story.
And Robbie Burns night, I'm sure, is coming at least once a year. So
Right.
he'd
Okay.
be the annual Scottish stick player.
Right.
You
Okay.
know. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
we'll
So,
have to. Well, we'll have to do it. Have to catch up, mate. It's been
yeah.
an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your journey, and it's a real inspiration to me, and I'm sure a lot of other people. And I look forward to hearing any new recordings or hearing, keeping in contact and finding out what you're up to.
Yeah. I hopefully I'll keep in contact with everything. And great. Thank you very, very much for doing these whole series too, because it's just been wonderful to hear these things and people that I know the names, but I haven't heard them before. And, kind of bringing this whole world of tapping madness together. It's
Yeah,
just
well,
great.
for me, I think we're stronger together than we are apart, and we
Yeah,
can all learn from
definitely.
each other, and I think it's actually really refreshing. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's part of music, isn't it?
absolutely,
So
buddy.
hopefully we get to leave something nice behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
Great.
Jim. Well, thanks again so much for your time, buddy. Have a great day, and I look forward to catching up
Thanks,
IRL soon.
Finbar. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, buddy. Thanks,
Cheers.
mate. Take care.
Bye.